European explorers and travelers have visited West Africa from the 15th to the 17th century. In Senegambia, the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the French were among the first Europeans who set foot there. The Berlin Conference of 1884, which is often equated with the Scramble for Africa, was a major benchmark in the colonization of the continent. Historians have identified two types of colonial rules in Africa: the direct assimilation rule and the indirect rule. The French championed the former, and the British implemented the latter. Colonization was also accompanied by the Euro-Christian ideology, so-called mission civilisatrice, or civilizing mission in English, based on the assumption that Europeans and their cultures were superior. The French influence in Senegal started with the contact between Senegal and France in the early 17th century, when French commercial companies began trading at the mouth of the river Senegal in the region of Saint Louis, which was first entered by the Portuguese in 1445. Gorée Island off the coast of Dakar, Senegal, which is one of the most known slave trading posts of Africa, where the so-called door of no return is located, was fought over by the Dutch, the French, and the British between the 17th and 18th century, before it ultimately became controlled by the French. The local Wolof and Serer states of Waalo, Jolof, Kajoor, and Siin were involved in the transatlantic slave trade before it was abolished in the mid-19th century. As the slave trade declined, the trade of other goods, including acacia gum used in the production of textile materials and medicine in Europe, developed. The chief architect of French colonization of Senegal and West Africa at large is Louis-Léon César Faidherbe. Faidherbe was appointed as governor of Senegal in 1854, expanded French colonization into the mainland of Senegal, creating military posts and conquering one of the major Wolof states of Waalo. He began to build the colonial infrastructure in Senegal, including a banking system, civil administration, bridges, forts, and education. His successors built on his legacy. Senegal had a singular place in the colonial French Empire, known as AOF, Afrique Occidentale Française, or French West Africa in English. French West Africa consisted of a federation of 18 colonies. Its capital was located in Saint Louis, Senegal, called Ndar in Wolof, from 1895 to 1902. The capital was located in Saint Louis and later moved to Dakar from 1902 to 1960. By the end of the 18th century, Saint Louis, with a population of about 7,000, had a European colony numbering about 600, the largest on the whole coast of West Africa. It also had an important assimilated mulatto community whose descendants are still found in Saint Louis, as most French men there took African mistresses known as signars and had children with them. The French fully implemented the direct assimilation rule in Senegal as reflected in the policy of the Quatre Communes. The inhabitants of the 4 municipalities called Quatre Communes in French acquired French citizenship and could have representation in France. These 4 communes were Dakar, Gorée, Rufisque, and Saint Louis. People who lived outside of the 4 communes were French subjects. Because people who lived outside of the four communes were not citizens, they received discriminatory treatments in the French colonial administration. They were administered in units called cercles in French. The people of the four municipalities or communes, whether they were Europeans, mulattoes, or Africans, were French citizens and enjoyed political rights because the policy was one of the direct assimilation to French culture and citizenship. Blaise Diagne, the first black African elected to the French Chamber of Deputies in 1914, and the first to hold a senior position in the French colonial government, was from Gorée, one of the four communes. The assumption was that French culture was the highest ideal for everyone. Thus, the French colonial administration believed that the Senegalese people ought to be educated in order to be assimilated into the French culture. Saint-Louis became the first experimentation place of the direct assimilation policy in French West Africa. This led Crowder to note that Senegal, especially Saint-Louis, is the most interesting of all the French African colonies because it was the only place where the direct assimilation policy was actually realized to a full extent. The French Governor General Faidherbe, based in Saint-Louis, created some schools for assimilation purposes. The major program was called L'École des Fils de Chefs, or the School for the Children of Chiefs, also referred to as L'École des Otages, the School for Hostages. The French assimilation rule was also implemented through the introduction of the French language as the primary language of education. Ultimately, the process was designed to make the Senegalese people use French as their major means of communication, the language of the French Republic. There are numerous figures celebrated in Senegal as having resisted French colonization. They include traditional rulers and Muslim religious leaders. Most Senegalese are Muslim. The high percentage of Muslims in Senegal is due to the early Islamization of the country, which dates back to the Islamization of West Africa between the 11th and the 16th century, prior to the French colonization. According to Geller, 1995, northern Senegal's long involvement in the trans-Saharan trade exposed it to Islamic currents from North Africa, and the people inhabiting the banks of the Senegal River were among the first to embrace Islam in West Africa. During the 11th century, the Pulaar ruler of the Takrur state, which involved the region of Saint-Louis, Warjabi, came under influence of the Muslim traders and missionaries from North Africa. The great majority of the Pulaar followed Warjabi's example. Thus, the Pulaar, or the Tukulur people, became the first major Senegalese ethnic group to embrace Islam en masse, as Geller rightly notes. By the 14th century, Quranic schools were established in Senegal, and many Senegalese Muslims were able to use the classical Arabic script to write their own languages, the tradition known as Ajami. Furthermore, during the mid-19th century, some Pulaar clerics led holy wars that sought to overthrow traditional rulers and create Muslim theocratic states in the region. The most prominent Pulaar clerical warrior, to use David Robinson's words, was Alhaj Omar Tal, who was initiated into the Tijaniya Brotherhood while on pilgrimage to Mecca in 1820. The holy wars coincided with the widespread resistance against French conquest and occupation of the African soil. In many areas, Islam became a stimulus for armed resistance against colonization, led by religious leaders who were suspicious of the French colonial agenda. Other African leaders who oppose French colonization and are celebrated in Senegal include Alboury Ndiaye, the Bourba Jolof, the King of Jolof, and Lat Dior Ngoné Latyr Diop, the king of the powerful Wolof state of Kajoor. Lat Dior is the most celebrated national hero in Senegal for the stances he took against French colonization. Lat Dior, who was killed in 1886 in Dekle, is often referred to in the academic literature as the leader of the last Senegalese armed resistance against French colonial rule. Two Sufi leaders are also celebrated for their subsequent cultural and religious opposition to the Euro-Christian French assimilation agenda and for finding non-violent means to accommodate French colonial rule. These two are Al-Hajj Malik Sy, the leader of the branch of the Tijaniya Sufi order of the Wolof people, and Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, the founder of the Muridiya Sufi order. Because of their experience in the Maghreb, especially in Algeria in the early 19th century, the French administration saw Islam as a potential threat to colonial rule. Thus, Muslim leaders they regarded as dangerous were persecuted or even exiled. This was the case of Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba, the founder of the Muridiya Sufi order. Cheikh Ahmadou Bamba was deprived of his freedom from 1895 to 1927 when he died, based on false accusations that he was preparing to wage holy war against the French colonial administration. Several factors led to Senegal's independence. These factors include the resistant movements from the traditional and religious leaders noted earlier, the experience of Senegalese soldiers who fought in World War I and World War II in Europe, and thus demystified their French colonial masters, the injustices they experienced during and after World War II, and the effect of the growing decolonization movements that emerged around that period. The movie Kande Charoye by Sembène Ousmane, called the father of African cinema, illustrates one of the most horrific moments of French colonial rule in Senegal. The French administration gunned down African soldiers who were asking for nothing more than their overdue payments for the military services they rendered in Europe in World War II. Senegal receives its independence on April 4, 1960. Its first president was Léopold Sédar Senghor, who served from 1960 to 1980. Though he was a well-known Roman Catholic, leading Muslim leaders of the country supported him throughout his term. President Senghor is locally called le poète président, the poet president in English, for he was more a scholar and a poet than a politician. President Senghor is regarded as the father of the Senegalese nation, the one who laid the country's democratic foundation. He is remembered as one of the very few world leaders who gave up power before the expiration of their terms to devote his life to his family and scholarly interest. The second president of Senegal was Abdou Diouf, who served from 1981 to 2000. The third president was Abdoulaye Wade, who served from 2000 to 2012. The fourth current president is Macky Sall. Elected in 2012, Macky Sall is the first Senegalese president who was born after independence and is a product of the Senegalese education system. Today, Senegal is a secular and stable, developing multi-ethnic country. It is hailed as one of the most stable democratic states in West Africa. It has never experienced a military coup and has a vibrant civil society. Its population is about 14 million. The Senegalese population consists of over 90% of Muslims and a small minority of Roman Catholics and followers of traditional African religions. The country is hailed as a model of religious tolerance and diversity. Its major ethnic groups are the Wolof, who comprise about 44% of the population, Pular about 24%, Serer about 15%, Mandinka about 3%, Jola about 4%, Soninke about 2%, Europeans and Lebanese about 1%, and other ethnic groups from neighboring countries comprise about 7% of the population. Besides French, the official language, Wolof, is the lingua franca of the country. Religious leaders have power in politics and serve as social regulators in times of crisis. Senegal is very active in peacekeeping operations in Africa and around the world. However, the secessionist movement in its southern traditional region of Casamance, which is led by the MFDC, Mouvement des Forces Démocratiques de la Casamance, or Movement of the Democratic Forces of Casamance, remains one of its most enduring national wounds. Today, Senegal is a nation with a triple heritage. To borrow late Professor Mazroui's words, it is a nation with deep African roots and Islamic and French influences. As Geller rightly notes, Senegal's geography has brought its people into close contact with Islamic North Africa and the West, and has made the country a crossroad where the Black African, Islamic, and European civilizations have met, clashed, and blended.